Hello and welcome to the Kamla Show, where we bring you interviews and conversations with technologists, entrepreneurs, filmmakers, and other news from in and around the San Francisco Bay Area. My guest today is Anshuman Bapna. He's the co-founder of MyGola.com, an India-based travel startup. In April of 2015, MyGola.com was acquired by MakeMyTrip.com, a publicly traded Indian company. We recorded this interview in 2013 in Banglore.
Gola is also another Hindi word which means that lollipop that is made of crushed ice.
And, ice cone with the sugar syrup.
Exactly, and the idea is that you can customize that cone with any different flavor, any flavor that you want. But MyGola has another interpretation which one of our Chinese users told us, and in fact he thought that we had the best travel name ever possible. He said My and Go are English words, and La with a certain intonation in Mandarin means where. So where shall I go? And that's a great name for a travel site.
Did you stumble upon MyGola after the Chinese interpretation later on, or was it?
The reality is even more prosaic than that. Actually, MyGola was a name for a different startup idea altogether. And it just was a provisional name that we thought we'll change at some point in time. I think in the end, we just fell in love with the name and we thought we'll just go with that.
What was the original idea?
The original idea was a social network for neighborhoods. So imagine the fact that you could draw a circle around the few places that you spend most of your time in, and those will be your golas, where you could have a social network thriving there. Thankfully, I didn't work on that idea.
So was this influenced by Google Circles or Facebook? Or?
This is post-Facebook, pre-Google Circles.
Do you have any lessons that you learned from that first startup that you're applying to your second startup, which you started in 2010?
That's right. So that's a perennial question for an entrepreneur. Where
I'm not asking for any. For you, how has that helped you? Because by sharing your story, you're also letting others know who may be thinking of going down that path.
Yes, I think financial success is a very important criteria for me. And in fact, that's one of the reasons why I continue to be very hungry about what I'm doing right now. But other than that, there were a bunch of things that I learned in the process. And one of the big ones was about making sure the chemistry between the founding team is phenomenal. And we were all friends when we started out this company, Right Half. And we made a bunch of mistakes around that time, which were around basically treading too carefully not to step on each other's feet. And this time around, I made sure that I was very clear where different responsibilities lay. And when I was trying to find a co-founder, there were certain kinds of things I was looking for in that co-founder, and I was fortunate enough to find one.
You have two co-founders. You're two co-founders of MyGola.
That's right.
Whose idea was it?
It was mine.
It was your idea. So you went seeking for a co-founder.
That's right.
What were the characteristics, or what were some of the things you're looking for your co-founder to do, and how did you divide the labor? Did you want to do the financing part, the raising the money part, or how did? Because when you have two people, running a company, there are two pairs of eyes.
That's right.
And there are two different visions. So somebody has to lead.
Yes.
In some ways.
Yes.
So how were you doing that?
So in my case, this time, the second time around, I was very clear. In fact, I was very clear that if it needed to be, then I would run the company all by myself, and even including engineering. So I actually taught myself programming to be able to just be a one-man company if needed. But at the same time, I knew how hard it is to do a startup and how important it is to have someone else with complementary skills to look at the same problems with a very different perspective altogether. So when I started looking out for potential co-founders, I was looking for someone who would complement me on the operations side, for example. So I am more often of a strategic, big vision thinker kind of a guy, and often I do not do as good a job at the actual details. And I was looking for someone who was much more operationally focused. I was also looking for someone who was much more grounded in India, and that was one of the things that I was trying to do with this company. MyGola is a company that is sitting in Bangalore, but is trying to address a global problem. And we have almost 70% of our customers from outside of India, vast majority of them from the US. So the perspective always was that I'll have a very strong co-founder in India who will help, who will actually run the entire the operations here. And I would move back to the Valley and make sure that we had the right kind of investments, we had the right kind of partnerships, marketing, and so on.
So Prateek Sharma is your co-founder.
That's right.
How did you find him?
Prateek was my junior from IIT, same hostel, same department, and we have known each other for more than a decade now.
So you
to
fell
go.
back on your old school ties.
Yeah, absolutely. And we had some phenomenal talent to choose from.
How do you resolve any differences that come up between the two of you? Is there a certain system you have set up, or is it left unspoken? How do you do it? How do you resolve?
Yes, so I think that
Because chemistry is something that you said is
chemistry,
important.
yeah, it's like a marriage almost. And for both of us, for Pratik and me, we're both married. Both of us have very young children, and for us, this is a significant time commitment and significant financial commitment. So, and we end up spending probably as much time with each other as we do with our spouses.
But like in any marriage, even if the communication is good, one of the spouses may not respond in the way you want them to respond.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You know, so
that's something which we were very clear about in the beginning. So the buck stops with me. I am the CEO, and at the end of the day, that it is me who has to break a deadlock.
So you're the 51%.
I'm the 51%.
Okay.
But the idea is that
does he have a dissenting vote?
Yeah, just like all marriages, right? They of course have a veto at all times, right? But you kind of persuade and cajole and threaten and use all those tactics to get to where you want to get to.
Okay. So 2010 you started the company, and what was the original mission? Because right now in 2013 you're pivoting, we'll come back to that.
Yes.
But in 2010 when you started the company, your mission was real trips for real people?
Yeah, so I'll actually step back for a second. So to me, being in Google was phenomenal at one level.
You joined Google after the first startup?
No, so I sold my startup, then I went to business school at Stanford, and then I worked at Deloitte for 2 years, and then joined Google, and I was in their New York office. And Google was phenomenal because I hadn't seen another large company work at that, like basically fire on all 8 cylinders and do phenomenally well. So to me, it was an eye-opening experience. The challenge that I thought was that Google's approach was very endemic in the Valley, which was take an algorithmic approach to solve hard problems. And while that's great for scalability, I thought there were truly hard problems out there that could only be solved with a combination of 90% technology and 10% human judgment.
Can I just stop you for a minute?
Sure.
Can you break down what you just said, algorithmic problem for us lay people? What does it mean?
So imagine speech to text, right? So imagine you call into a phone and there's no person at the other end, and you say, I'm looking for a pizza shop near Los Altos. And the engine behind is able to understand what you're looking for and serve you up the 3 pizza places in Los Altos. For this simple thing to happen, tons of things have to go right. And people have been trying to solve this same problem for almost 50 years now. And Google's approach has been, and it has worked phenomenally well, by the way, is to take a root statistical kind of an approach to it. So what they have done is that they have collected billions of data samples and voice samples of people actually making different kinds of requests and converting those speech patterns into text, and then they have a way to take that text into search results. But if you go to if you look at the current state of speech to text technology right now, and if you put it in front of a layperson, they'll actually laugh at the output. Because the vast majority of times it doesn't work, the accent doesn't, the software does not catch the accent and so on. And at that level, the layperson would say, well, I could do better than that.
But that's got to do more with the voice recognition, not with the data.
So the hard part is voice recognition. And to me, speech recognition is one of those problems where a 90% tech and a 10% human judgment kind of approach has actually worked much better. So this is one of those cases where you use off-the-shelf software to break down the problem into simpler pieces, but then have a last layer of an actual person making that call. Now, obviously, you can't do it for anything and everything.
So human intelligence is important.
It is super important. So in fact, Stratify, the company that acquired us, actually had that exact thing going for them. So they had this software that could take millions of documents and automatically identify the concepts or the topics in those documents. And they could go, for example, they could look at an article and say, oh, it's about money laundering and narcotics. Yet, at the last level, at the last mile, you needed a person to actually make that distinction between what money laundering was and what narcotics was. They're both crimes, but they have different meanings, different import altogether. So to me, those kind of computer science problems are ones that are not amenable to a pure algorithmic solution. They're amenable to this hybrid.
So coming back to what you were doing in 2010, so it was real people, real trips, real people.
So travel planning was exactly one of those problems, which is in travel planning, if you're trying to find out what to do in Barcelona with kids, frankly, just Googling it is good enough.
Why Google it? Here's a viewer who, when I told them I'm going to be interviewing MyGola, they said, What is so different about MyGola? We have Lonely Planet.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, you have all that content already out there.
Yeah.
So the hard part is not things to do in Barcelona. So in fact, I'll tell you why. In fact, it'll also a good segue into what we're doing now, which is that the vast majority of times the questions that we get from our travelers are not about things to do in Barcelona. It's about things to do in Barcelona with kids for 3 days. And what they actually mean is find me kid-friendly stuff in Barcelona, and not only any and all kid-friendly stuff, but take into account that my hotel is here in Barcelona, the fact that museums open at 9 a.m. and not at 8 a.m.
But that any Lonely Planet, if you read through properly, or any rough guide, you know, there are enough forums.
Yeah, so you have a 300
I'm playing
page...
the devil's advocate here, Anshuman, trying to see, okay, what is it that you're bringing? Because people may not be willing, because this is a subscription-based model, right?
Yeah.
So I have to pay, I have to fork out money.
Let me give you an example. So, for example, if someone is planning a trip to Amsterdam with kids, then among 50 other problems that they're solving, one of the small minor ones is what kind of cafes to hang out at. Now, the way we solve this problem is by, first of all, doing a lot of technology work to make sure we find the best cafes in Amsterdam. Then we read the reviews automatically, find out if they're kid-friendly or not. Then we'll plot them on a map and see how far they are from where you're staying. And then finally, we have about 5 cafes that we have narrowed it down to that we should recommend. Now, we think that's, on the web, that's probably good enough, which is that, oh, just throw it out, and it's for Kamla to decide which cafe to go to. But Kamla has 20 other problems to solve for her Amsterdam trip. So that's the point where we have a human come in, who's the planner for your trip. And he'll say,
so is this human specialized on what is good in Amsterdam?
Exactly. So this person is specialized in what's good in Amsterdam. And
so they're a local guide of
they're
some
a local
sort.
guide, yes. So instead of having to sift through the entire web, what they would look at is those 5 cafes. They would maybe play the videos that we have found for those cafes and say, oh, this cafe is awesome because it's right next to the canal. Or this cafe is awesome because it has beautiful sunshine filtering in. Now, that's the kind of stuff that can actually change your experience very qualitatively. But that's the thing that only a human can do. It's very hard to automate that kind of intelligence.
So in some ways, it's what in the good old days, the travel agents would do.
Exactly.
Where they would set up the tickets as well as your plan and say, this is what you need to do. And if the travel agent had traveled, he or she would know what were some of the places for you to go.
Imagine, basically, I think in a way I would say the travel agents have absconded on their role of providing travel advice.
They've absconded or their jobs have disappeared?
Well, the jobs have disappeared because they were not doing that good a job of providing travel advice, personalized travel advice. Now, that personalized travel advice is the part which we're trying to bring back, but at scale. Instead of you having to go to Main Street and find someone and actually talk to them, you could actually build that relationship with someone who lives in Amsterdam and actually get a trip planned by someone who knows a lot about that. But the heavy lifting is still done by technology because that's the only way we can do it for 10 million people.
So your original idea was use 90% of technology and 10% humans.
Right.
And based on that, you went and raised $1 million from 2 people or 2, is it organizations or individuals?
Organizations, actually.
Yes.
So we were lucky enough to, at the very outset, we had funding from some of our friends from Stanford and Google. And then we raised institutional round of $1 million, and that was 2 people.
So that was round A.
That was actually that was still a seed round.
Seed round, okay.
And the major investor there was Bloomberg Capital. It's a fund based out of San Francisco, and the other was Dave McClue's 500 Startups. So these 2 guys, and that's the money that we raised.
Why did they decide to fund you? What was it about your pitch that attracted them?
So I think
are you the first Indian company that 500 Startups has funded?
Technically not. Technically, SlideShare is the first company. But
Okay.
SlideShare, Rashmi and her team was always based in the Valley, and they
Yeah.
had a very strong India presence. I think the pitch that attracted at least Dave was, one was the credentials of the team, because we all had entrepreneurial experience in the past. But the second one, as he told me, was that we were trying to solve a very obvious problem that people have known about for a very long time, in a market where it's very obvious how to make money. You don't have to reinvent the wheel in how will we eventually figure out how to make money. We're not like Twitter where at some point in time you have to monetize the conversations between 2 people. We are in travel where people are routinely spending $4,000 on something. So for him, the business model was the clear part, and the fact that we were taking a very innovative new approach to solving the main core pain point was something that attracted him.
And the innovative new approach is the technology part.
The hybrid approach.
The hybrid approach.
Right.
Okay, so nobody else has done what you've done?
I don't think so. Not in travel.
Fast forward to 2012, the word pivot entered your vocabulary.
Yes, okay.
So in the good old days, they will say we're changing our business model.
Everything is failing, we need to change our business model. Right?
Whatever, but that's part of the journey,
Yeah.
Because you discover. And then you have to have the strength to acknowledge that what we envisioned is not working.
Right.
And then work on it. So while as an outsider, we may say, oh, the business is failing, you as an insider running the company are aware of what is going right and wrong,
Absolutely.
sitting in the cockpit. What did not work for you and why are you pivoting?
So the main thing that did not work for us was that it did not appear that it was going to be a very big business. It would be a profitable business. It could have been a nice lifestyle business, but not a large $100 million, $500 million kind of a business.
Is it because of scalability? What was the issue?
Scalability was actually not the concern because we spent tremendous amounts of time scaling this up. We have 5,000 guides now, and we think we can handle tens of thousands of trips a day if you wanted to. The challenge was that we often found our users reverting, like people who really used us, to start thinking of us as an outsourced travel desk. So
like the American Express outsourced travel desk.
So their next step was, well, you're doing all this for me, that's great, but the next thing you need to do for me is that if I get stranded at Schiphol Airport in Amsterdam, you need to figure out what my next flight is. And that's something which we don't have any technology leverage on.
How did that expectation creep into your users' worldview?
I think because we got some of the most rara feedback that we got for our product, for our old product, was from professionals who do not have an executive admin or an executive admin kind of a function in their office.
But that's increasingly true. I mean,
that's increasingly
in
true.
large corporations, you're part of a bunch of people, sharing one admin.
Imagine people like you and me, right? We are both entrepreneurs at some level. And we don't have an executive admin necessarily handling our bookings and everything else for us. And we would love to have some kind of a travel desk kind of a support that American Express card holders have. But we didn't want to go into that direction because that seemed more like a traditional travel agency kind of a model.
Was that the only thing, the feedback that they expected more out of you, or was there anything else? The fact that, one was the expectation had changed, they were expecting more from you. Two is you thought the money that you were originally thinking that you could make was not there.
So I think, the reason why we have taken such a hard approach to solving travel planning is because we want to truly solve it at scale globally. And for us, getting into a niche, which is basically a travel concierge kind of a niche for professionals who want this kind of support, was something that I did not think was an interesting enough business for us. It was not just big enough for us, given all the work that we're doing. And in the process, as we stepped back, we started doing hundreds of interviews with our customers and other travelers we would find on Twitter. And some very interesting patterns emerged, which have actually led us into a new direction now.
And that is? What are the patterns and what's the new direction?
So one thing that we realized was that first of all, the vast majority of questions that we were getting on MyGola were actually what we call itinerary questions, which is someone was looking for a 3-day plan to Amsterdam, for maybe with kids. But what we were doing and what everyone else on the web does is to throw a list back at them. You'll say these 17 things in Amsterdam are kid-friendly. Now it's your problem to figure out what time in the morning you should go there, whether they can even be done in that time or not, and so on. And then we started looking around to see, okay, so who else is doing itineraries on the web? And turns out almost no one is. The second thing we realized is that people get inspired by trips taken by other real travelers all the time. So imagine reading an article in the New York Times of a blog post of a backpacking trip to New Zealand. Now, we saw a lot of people getting inspired by those trips. So we wrote technology to convert all those trips automatically into this beautiful tablet-friendly kind of a format that you can browse like a travel magazine, and you can pick and choose pieces from it.
It's almost like Pulse.
Almost like Pulse. Actually, the UI looks quite a bit like Pulse.
And is that the new MyGola?
That's a new. It's on next.mygola.com.
And that was not there in your first rev?
It was not, yeah.
Your first rev was a regular web-based UI. You just went and submitted the questions, became a member. It was subscription-based, $30 a year?
That's right.
Okay. Now the new
$30 per trip.
Per trip?
Yeah.
Okay, so if I make 10 trips, you get $300 from me.
Or you take the annual plan, which is $99.
$99, okay. So you're a product guy, so you know how to get the money out, one way or the other. So, and I mean it nicely because you have to make money. So that was the original. Now in the Pulse one, if I go, has that launched?
No, it's going to launch at the end of at the end of January, actually.
Okay, so it's going to launch in February. By February first week, we should be able to see. So now you're going to be presenting pictures to us, and then we point which picture we want, or
it's actually better than that. So imagine you could go in and you could say, hey, I'm thinking of a backpacking trip to New Zealand, and we would come up with trips that real travelers have taken already.
Do I type that in?
Yeah, you can type that in.
Okay.
And we'll show you something that a New York Times guy wrote about a backpacking trip in New Zealand, or something from another blog, and hundreds of such trips.
So what you're doing is you're basically harvesting existing content and putting it in a
So
nice.
that's the first part.
In a nice picture.
Yeah, so that's the first part. So the first part is that you can now basically browse all of these like a magazine. Now, as you browse, we'll start learning about your preferences, that you seem to like Auckland a lot, you seem to like North Island a lot, you seem to like certain kinds of activities a lot. And at the end of it, you can give a certain parameter and say, well, all this is nice. However, I have only 7 days. And by the way, I have to be in Auckland for this particular thing, etc. These are my constraints. And based on that, the magic part, the wow part of what we do is that we'll come back with a day-by-day plan, hour-by-hour plan of what you should be doing, where you should be eating, where you should be staying, all automatically taking into account your constraints.
Anshuman, so you've gone from real people, real trips to creating automated travel planning engine. That's the pivot you've done.
That's right. Absolutely.
And you're looking to raise money.
We are actually in the process of closing another round.
Another round.
Yes.
So you're busy pitching, or you've already
We're actually
pitched.
busy negotiating, actually.
You're busy negotiating.
Right.
So by the first quarter of 2013, we should know whether you've landed your first round of Series A funding.
That's right.
Anshuman, wish you all the best, and thank you for stopping by and
Thank you
talking
very
to
much,
us.
Kamala.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching. We'll be back again next week with another show. If you missed any of our episodes, you can watch them on our YouTube channel.